Call this meeting to order. This is the 6th meeting of the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. Today we have the opportunity to review the estimates, the supplementary estimates B for 2013 and 2014. These votes are specifically B1, pardon me, 1B, 5B, 10B, 30B and 35B under Indian Affairs and Northern Development. Colleagues, today we do have the privilege of the Minister. He has joined us for the first hour. Minister Valcourt, thank you for being here. And we have with him officials from the department. We have the Deputy Minister, Michael Warnock. Thank you so much for being here. And we also have the Chief Financial Officer, Susan McGowan. Thank you so much for being here. Minister, we'll turn it over to you for your opening statement, and then we'll certainly have some questions for you. So thanks again for being here, and please begin with your opening statement.
Okay. D'abord, merci.
First of all, thank you for welcoming me here, Mr. Chairman. I'm, of course, very happy to be here with you this morning to discuss with you the supplementary estimates B for fiscal year 2013-2014. Since 2006, our government has been working with our Aboriginal partners to remove barriers that are preventing Aboriginal people and Northerners from developing stronger, healthier, and more self-sufficient communities. And while we've, of course, made significant progress, we also know there is much work to be done. For example, and I use this example because it's important we recognize that as a government, we must assert that Aboriginal women are disproportionately represented as victims of violent crime. And this is a situation that is simply unacceptable, and this is why we continue to take concrete action to address the issue of violence against Aboriginal women, and why we have invested since 2006 over $240 million in the Family Violence Prevention Program. In Economic Action Plan 2013, our government committed $24 million over 2 years for this program. So 11.7 million of this is included in this year's supplementary estimates, which you have before you, such that the total annual funding will remain at over $30 million for this year, as well as for next year, 2014-2015. This program in particular enhances the safety and security of some of Canada's most vulnerable in the country, First Nation women and children living on reserve.
Ce programme-là, Monsieur le Président, a permis de soutenir quelques 41 refuges partout au pays qui ont fourni des services à plus de 16 500 enfants et de 18 000 femmes vivant dans les réserves. Et ont tenu plus de
I apologize. We've lost translation.
Oops, I'm sorry. I apologize, but I think it's a technical problem. It seems to just skip and shut off on its own. I'll keep an eye on the light. My apologies. What I was saying is that since 2006, this program had supported 41 shelters across the country that had provided shelter services for over 16,500 children and 18,000 women living on reserve. As well, it offered over 1,800 family violence prevention and awareness activities in Aboriginal communities across Canada.
Mr. Chair, to state how pleased I am that we were able to finally pass the Family Homes on Reserves and Matrimonial Interests of Rights Act, which will provide First Nations women and children with legal protections and rights on reserve in the event of marital breakdown or death, protections that they have been without for nearly 3 decades. Now, these supplementary estimates also contribute to our efforts to reduce barriers to Aboriginal people's full participation in the Canadian economy through investment in education, skills training, and the urban Aboriginal strategy. We know that Aboriginal youth represent the fastest growing segment of the population in Canada, and yet unfortunately they have one of the lowest graduation rates. And that is exactly why our government is currently consulting on a draft legislative proposal for First Nation education that would put in place a system that is accountable to students and ensures that First Nation students have access, like all Canadians, to good quality education. Now, our government firmly believes that all First Nation students across Canada deserves access to a school system that meets, if not exceed, provincial and territorial standards, a school system where First Nation culture and language takes its rightful place, and which respects treaty rights. Now, attesting to the priority we place on education, in Economic Action Plan 2013, our government invested $10 million over 2 years for Inspire to provide post-secondary scholarships and bursaries to First Nation and Inuit students, $5 million of which is included in this year's supplementary estimates. I strongly believe, Mr. Chair, that, I strongly believe in Canada's youth, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, and I believe that it is important to equip them with the necessary tools they need to take our country's future in their hands and carry it successfully into the future. Through Economic Action Plan 2013, our government is also investing over $240 million to reform the Income Assistance Program and connect First Nation youth between the ages of 18 and 24 with skills, training, and jobs. And these investments will help to provide personalized supports for First Nation youth in receipt of income assistance for skills training that will help them find and keep a job. And the funds included in this year's supplementary estimates, just over $20 million, will be used to initiate the first year of this program. Finally, the supplementary estimates also include $12.7 million for the urban Aboriginal strategy, which is intended to reduce barriers and create economic opportunities for urban Aboriginals to get the training and skills they need to participate fully in the economy. Now, the majority of these supplementary estimates, however, will go toward the settlement of specific claims. $450 million of these funds is provided to supplement the Specific Claims Settlement Fund for 2013-14, and the remaining $22 million will be used for the implementation of the Specific Claims Action Plan. Now, as members of this committee know, in 2007, our government took unprecedented action to deal with the backlog of specific claims and reach a negotiated settlement that resolve outstanding legal obligations of the government, provide a fair deal to taxpayers, and create economic opportunities for First Nation communities and surrounding areas. And I'm proud to report, Mr. Chair, that 100% of specific claims submitted since 2008 have been responded to within the 3-year time frame set out by the Justice at Last initiative. And furthermore, since 2007, the government has cleared a backlog of 541 claims at the assessment stage, doubling the number of claims in negotiation across the country. So that's quite an achievement. Finally, our government also believes that Northerners are best placed to make the important decisions about how to run their economies and how to maximize use of their resources. And that is why I was pleased to be in Yellowknife this past June to sign a historic devolution agreement that will provide the Northwest Territories with greater decision-making power over a range of new responsibilities which will lead to jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity across the territory. De fait, le budget supplémentaire.
Indeed, the supplementary estimates you have before you today support the implementation of the Northwest Territories Devolution Agreement by providing over $20 million that will allow our government to satisfy its obligations, by virtue of this agreement, and to make payments to the government and to Aboriginal groups in the Northwest Territories to offset their one-time costs associated with devolution. This is a critical time for the Northwest Territories and indeed a historic juncture in their political development, and we continue to work toward a target date of April 1st, 2014, as requested by the Premier of the Government of Northwest Territories and agreed to by the Prime Minister. This includes fostering economic development by improving northern regulatory systems while protecting, of course, our environmental heritage and giving more control and autonomy to the Northerners. Mr. Chairman, our government believes that all Canadians, regardless of where they live, north or south, on or off reserve, should be able to fully participate in a strong, dynamic Canadian economy. And I will stop here, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions that members of the committee have pertaining to Supplementary Estimates B for 2013-2014.
Taking the time to come and give us some information about supplementary B estimates. We also want to thank your staff, through you, Minister, for the briefing that they did provide to our analysts and, by extension, our committee through the briefing notes that have been circulated to committee members. Those briefings are helpful, and I know we as a committee want to thank you for providing that to our committee. We'll begin the rounds of questioning with Mr. Jenny Jourdain for the first 7 minutes.
Monsieur le Ministre, bon matin.
Good morning, Minister. I have 4 series of questions to put to you, and I will try to be succinct, but if we run out of time for your answers, I would appreciate a written answer, and I will also table the questions to you in writing. In the main estimates, the Specific Claims Tribunal had planned for $1 million for 2013-2014, but in the Supplementary Estimates B, we have $2.2 million for these activities, and the monies will be transferred to Aboriginal Affairs, even though you'll have less money for the specific claims. We're wondering at this. Could you tell us which measures you have taken to ensure adequate long-term funding to allow the tribunal to do its work in the future? And in the same vein, the budget for 2013 promised $54 million over 2 years to ensure that specific claims are dealt with quickly. Could you tell me if that is reflected in these supplementary estimates? I will call upon my Deputy Minister, who will respond with regard to the details of that question. That's the first example, Mr. Chairman, of a program or an activity that was renewed in the budget. And in this case, we see the funding in the supplementary estimates A, B, and C. The initiative that the Minister described for claims was a 5-year initiative beginning in 2007. It was to be renewed in the budget of the spring, including the activities of the tribunal. We have the ability to self-fund these activities while awaiting the allocation of votes by Parliament, but the tribunal does not have the same resources. So we granted these resources to the tribunal, and in this budget, the money is coming back to the tribunal. And it evens out for the tribunal funding, and it's well financed for the next 5 years. Thank you. When the Act for Specific Claims was passed in 2008, you had $250 billion for this. Could you tell us, since 2008, the amount that was used to resolve these claims and the amount that was not spent in the following years? In the same vein, what is the status of this fund? Why do you have to ask for additional funds to resolve these claims? The $250 million per year were not sufficient for those cases. In the same vein, the department, does it know how many claims will be resolved between now and the time when we will run out of funding in 5 years' time? I'll continue to put my questions and I'll submit them to you in writing and you'll be able to answer afterwards. The answer, because it's just a matter of cash flow, we have predictions. We have an assessment of the claims we hope to negotiate, but since it's a negotiation process, we can't guarantee to you or to the minister that it will be cleared up within a given time frame. The Department of Finance has asked us to reprofile in other words, to move monies from one year to the next, and that's exactly what you see here in this budget. Third series of questions. What about the 5-year review of the specific claims process? What questions were brought up? And will a report be tabled to Parliament soon? There is a review exercise by Parliament that...
Donc, il y aura tout un exercice de sous-comité pour revoir l'efficacité du tribunal.
It's this console. My apologies. The additional budget, $69.5 million for extrajudicial settlements. Could you tell us exactly what is provided for how these monies will be spent and what they target? And perhaps we could call upon a technician to change the console so this doesn't happen again. We could provide additional details in writing, but there are 4 specific cases. This is a settlement between lawyers, the Sawitch First Nation. These are funds generated by oil activities, drilling. Then there's the Alexander First Nation in Alberta near Edmonton, the same type of issue. The third issue in Northern Ontario, 2 First Nations, an old project, a hydroelectricity project, and it's the damage brought about by the development in the past of this project. And the fourth one involves 15 individuals in schools in Quebec. How much time do I have left?
Okay.
I will share it with my colleague. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Over 2 years to renew the urban Aboriginal strategy. And I'm not going to go into all of those details, but I'm just wondering, can you, including in the supplementary estimates, what was the total allocation of the UAS in fiscal year 2012-2013, and what is the total allocation for this fiscal year?
UAS, what is that?
Urban Aboriginal strategy.
C'est 14 millions.
And maybe at the same time, and if you don't get a chance to respond right away by the time you find your answers, you can maybe write can you also let us know, is the current allocation sufficient to meet the needs of a growing urban Aboriginal population? And what specific projects are being supported by the funding allocation in these supplementary estimates?
C'est une autre activité renouvelée dans...
It is another activity that...
Voyez dans les budgets de dépenses.
Sorry, it happened again. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's about $14 million.
Et cette année, on va...
And this year, we will be funding at least 120 projects, and I'll provide a list So is there a reduction or an increase? It was renewed the same amount.
To meet the needs of a growing urban Aboriginal population, given that there's no increase?
Well, you know, every morning, you know, when I get to on the hill, I look for the tree where the money grows, and I haven't found it yet. So, you know, to the question whether it is sufficient, I guess I will answer by saying that within the current fiscal framework into which we must operate, we are doing as much as the taxpayers can afford.
Thank you.
Just ask that, to table the answer to the third question, which was what specific projects are being supported by the funding allocation in these supplementary estimates?
I think it's been
Thank
noted. Thank you. We'll turn now to Mr. Strahl for the next round of questioning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Minister, and I just wanted to salute certainly our translation team who's battling through some difficulties today. Do a great job helping us to do ours, so appreciate that. One of the things that I've had the pleasure since being appointed Parliamentary Secretary is meeting some of the folks that are involved with First Nations youth right across the country, and I'm thinking specifically of Roberta Jameson, the President and CEO of Inspire, who is a remarkable woman, a remarkable First Nations leader who's doing great work with Inspire, and I was pleased to host a dinner with her for this year's Inspire Award recipients and was very impressed, especially with the youth winners, the next generation of First Nations leadership that is coming up is certainly impressive, and they're already inspiring their communities. And I did want to ask about Inspire in these estimates. I see in the estimates that our government has invested $5 million to go to Inspire to flow funds for these bursaries and scholarships. How many bursaries and scholarships will Inspire be able to provide with these additional funds from the government?
Well, I mean, let me start by saying that, of course, we are committed to helping Aboriginal students to access post-secondary education and acquire the skills they need to fully participate in the labor market and in society. And over and above the program which our government provides to First Nation and Inuit students, you know, they can also benefit from other funding sources that target Aboriginal students, and I guess Inspire is an example of an organization providing bursaries. So we are proud to support Inspire, which has a proven record of success, providing scholarships to over 2,200 Aboriginal students annually, and raising significant support from a range of corporate donors to help support the student success. This $5 million will be matched by Inspire itself, and they awarded Inspire awarded you know, $5.2 million in 2012-13 to support 2,050 bursary and scholarship recipients for an average of about $2,500 a year. And with the government's pledge of $10 million over those 2 years, Inspire has publicly committed to raise another $10 million, which will result in about 8,000 students with scholarship and bursaries over 2 years. So that's quite a I think a successful undertaking.
Right, and certainly we've heard you speak and others speak about the importance of a quality education, quality post-secondary education, but as well the building block to that post-secondary, which is K-12 education. What is your office doing? What is the department doing to ensure that there's adequate dialogue and consultation with the government with First Nations and key stakeholders on something like the First Nations Education Act?
Well, this is an important question because, as many people know, we currently are in a consultation mode with First Nations stakeholders, provinces, interested Canadians about the challenge that First Nation students on reserve face in terms of the education system, which is non-existent right now. The genesis of the current proposal of legislative proposal, goes back to 2008 in the throne speech of the day. And since that time, in partnership with the First Nation, we have had studies, we have consulted, and consultations were officially launched by Minister Duncan in December of last year. And we have informed the latest legislative proposal with what we heard from stakeholders, First Nation, and this process is ongoing. But what is important to point out is that no decision has been made on the introduction of any bill in regard to this. We will continue consulting with First Nations and hopefully be capable of coming with the proposal that will find the support required to ensure that the challenge that we all face together be met.
The Minister will turn to Ms. Jones now for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Minister and your officials. My question is related to the $2 million that will be allocated from or reallocated from the contributions to grants through supplementary estimates, and it's related to the on-reserve income assistance program and assisted living. In the main estimates, you identified a reduction of $40.4 million to the income assistance program. And it's my understanding that a significant portion of the expected savings were linked to your department's policy shift from reasonable comparability to compliance with provincial rates and standards. But as we all know, in this month, the federal court struck down your policy to tie rates to provincial levels in Atlantic Canada. And it found you owed more procedural fairness regarding your lack of consultation with First Nations in Atlantic Canada. And in fact, the judge said there was never any meaningful consultation about the merits of a strict application of provincial rates and eligibility criteria. I can only assume from this case in Atlantic Canada that there has been a significant lack of consultation throughout the country. And my question today would be, given the court ruling, the federal court ruling, will you be pausing the implementation of this policy shift in Atlantic Canada, and will you indeed be pausing the entire policy shift for the country?
First of all, this is a court decision that was recently rendered, which we are still reviewing. So it would be improper for me to comment on that decision. Let's say that the Atlantic Canada is the only part of the country where these allegations have been made. The policy, which is an old policy, an old Treasury Board guidelines, is being implemented in the rest of Canada without problem. So as regard the Atlantic region, once we have reviewed the decision, we will be able to make a decision as to how to proceed from here.
Okay. The federal court judge also noted that it was particularly disturbing that there was no hard data on the number of recipients that would actually lose their entitlement to social assistance. further to a strict application of provincial eligibility criteria. And I want to ask, has the department undertaken an evaluation of the impacts of the decision to move to a strict mirroring of provincial rates or eligibility criteria for First Nation recipients?
As I just indicated, we are reviewing the decision, so no decision has been made.
Yeah, I understand the review of the decision. I guess just prior to the court, would there have been any evaluation of what the impact would be once you made the shift within the department? I guess I'm just looking to see if there was any evaluation process done prior to the court.
The policy shift is simply to consistently pay provincial rates according to provincial criteria as to who's eligible and not eligible, something we've been asked to do in education, child and family services, and many, many other areas. We are actually paying more generously in some Atlantic communities than the province would pay similar people in similar circumstances. The caseloads in communities are maintained by the First Nations, and they vary from week to week and month to month. So we would have some sense of the potential impact if we were overpaying. But it would vary from month to month depending on the caseloads. The caseloads are quite high in some communities and quite low in others.
I guess what I found a little bit strange about it is that the court didn't have access to the information, or it would certainly seem that way based on the ruling. And the kind of information that I'm looking for, I would imagine it's available within the department, and I would be happy if you could provide me with it at a later date. But I could
help you, Mr. Chair. We have a profile of every single First Nation community on our website that's continually updated, and it includes the social assistance caseload numbers.
Okay, well, I'll certainly have a look at it, but the numbers that I would be looking for is the number of recipients in total that would be affected and how many of those that could potentially lose entitlement benefits if this policy was implemented.
You can't really answer that question until you've gone in and done the compliance work, which we are being prevented from doing by the court decision, so it's a bit of a circular question.
Okay. In terms of the evaluation, then let me ask you this. Is there any documents related to the evaluation of the program and what the impacts might be that you could actually table with our committee?
I will certainly provide anything that we have. We have over 80 audits and evaluations posted on our website, and we have been looking at income assistance in the past. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what the most recent reports are, but we'll certainly make them available to the committee.
Okay. Do I still have time? Or? Okay. Thank you. One of the questions that you were looking at with regard to, just going through my notes here, the resolving of land claims, and I know that you did say that you had been making some progress in terms of the assessment process, but can you give me an idea in terms of the number of claims that would be near completion of negotiations right now that we could possibly see some settlement on?
Well, I mean, this is, I cannot predict what negotiations can lead to in terms of results. What is important to know is that there is sufficient fund that are allocated to meet any obligation that will arise out of those settlements. As I indicated, we have many claims that are being negotiated as we speak. That has doubled since the introduction of Justice at Last, and but to predict the exact number or round numbers of settlements, I'm afraid I cannot do.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Mr. Seaback for the next round of questions.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, I know that you talked a little bit about in your opening remarks some of the success stories with respect to Justice at Last, the specific claims action plan, I know certainly that when I've looked at some of the material, it's really been exceptional how the backlog of, as you mentioned, 541 cases were cleared. I was encouraged to hear you say that since 2008, 100% of claims have been responded to. That, to me, seems to be an exceptional number. I want to delve a little bit deeper into that. I mean, do you know how many claims are currently before the tribunal? With the $452 million extra dollars, are those earmarked for any specific claims that you think are about to be resolved?
Well, according to a document the deputy just cited to me, under assessment, okay, right now we have 90 claims under assessment, 39 at the level of research, 31 the subject of legal opinion being prepared by the Department of Justice, and 20 where the legal opinion has been signed. In negotiation right now we have 231, so the total in progress is 321, and concluded, as I said, through negotiations we have 385 that have been settled. We have 413 where no lawful obligation were found, and though 33 have been resolved through administrative remedy, and 326 files have been closed, so that we have concluded 1,157 specific claims.
And maybe, Michael, you know as well, what with the number of the 452 million, is that earmarked for some specific claims that you think are about to be resolved, or is that just an anticipation on what may be resolved in the coming year?
One of the features of the reform of 2007 is the Department of Finance has given us a specific settlement allotment. It can only be used for specific claims settlements and awards from the tribunal, no other purpose. And we can fairly flexibly roll it from year to year, so we don't get caught in sort of fiscal year-end sorts of things. So we go through a regular process with the Department of Finance and the Department of Justice, trying to ballpark what we expect to come to negotiation. We're certainly not going to send negotiators out to tables and not have the resources set aside for them. So it's a provision, it's an estimate. We're going to be a little under, a little over some years. We have some very big settlements come in. We have several in the range of 100 to 300 million, and some of them are $50,000. So it's no two claims are exactly alike.
Great. Thank you.
We will now turn to Mr. Bevington for the next round of questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for coming with us here today, and look forward to hearing his answers to my questions. Of course, I'm going to talk about devolution because, of course, that's a subject very dear to most people in the North's hearts, and I'm curious about the 24.8 million that's in grants and the supplementary estimates. Is this, and this is going to be divided between the Government of the Territories and Northwest Territories Aboriginal groups, according to your statement. Is there, first of all, what particular activities are going to be funded under that? So I'd like to see that. Is this a representative of the one-time funding that was described at $26.5 million in June 2013? Is this what the money represents, or is this money that's in addition to that particular allocation?
That refers to the one-time cost incurred by the NWT and the First Nations for the implementation of the agreement.
So it speaks to that 26.5 million.
Yes, it's part of the overall agreement that was tabled in Parliament yesterday, and it's the run-up costs to the handoff next April 1st.
Are there anticipation of further one-time only costs under next year's budget? Is that would that be safe to say that those things are? This is a fairly complicated process, changing administrations of many of the lands and resource aspects of the Northwest Territories, and of course. We all like to see things done as expeditiously as possible, but of course it may be that that these things take a little longer and are a little bit more complicated than first meets the eye.
Yes, there is a financial component to the overall devolution agreement that was reached, and perhaps when the devolution bill's in front of you, which won't be too long from now, we can provide further information on the financial aspects of it.
Okay. Now, under federal contaminated sites, you've got a very minor amount of money, $425,000 indicated. But in the Northwest Territories, there are many contaminated sites. Some of the progress on those sites has been restrained over the last number of years, especially those on the older uranium mines in the Satu region, the Great Bear Lake area. Is there anything within this process that would give us an indication of timeline for further work on the contaminated sites that have been retarded over the last while? The work that needs to be done to complete the work on these sites.
Well, I mean, the Northern Contaminated Sites Program, which is in place and you know, is being executed, you know, if you look at, you know, this has issued over $325 million in contracts with approximately 75% of this amount awarded to Northern and Aboriginal companies, and just the giant mine, which you know well, the giant mine remediation project has already issued approximately $130 million in contracts, with approximately 65% of these amounts awarded again to Northern and Aboriginal companies. So this is a responsibility of the government which we take seriously, and as I said once before, what is at the heart of all of this is the safety and the security of Northerners. Their health and safety is our prime concern, and it is the prime consideration as to moving on a particular project or not.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Mr. Bowen for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Chair, and let me add my voice of welcome to the panel. Thank you. Thanks for sharing your day with us this morning. Staying with devolution for a couple of questions here. Minister, the government of the Northwest Territories and the Prime Minister made a commitment to the people of the Northwest Territories to target effective dates of April 1, 2014. Can the Minister update our committee on the progress being made by the government towards delivering on that promise?
Well, as you may or may not know, because, you know, I'm pleased to report that this morning the House adopted the Ways and Means motion necessary for introducing the devolution legislation in the House. After much consultation with our partners in the government of the Northwest Territories and Aboriginal communities, our government is ready to move forward with our commitment to Northern control of Northern lands and resources. And the devolution agreement, which we have signed in June, and its attendant regulatory improvement will lead necessarily and definitely to job creations and economic opportunities for Northerners. And I look forward to bringing legislation to put this agreement into effect, as soon as we are ready, and we're getting there really rapidly.
So thank you. When we're placing resources in the hands of the Northwest Territories to generate opportunities for Canadians and enable the Northwest Territories to enjoy greater economic benefits, can the Minister point out the important benefits Northerners will enjoy stemming from the government's action toward the devolution of land and resources responsible in the Northwest Territories?
Well, I think it's fair to say that Northerners will benefit immensely from devolution. First and foremost, decision making will be in their hands. The people in the Northwest Territories will decide on the pace and the nature of development of resources in their territory, and this for the benefit of all of their residents and of course of Canada also. Not only will devolution provide greater decision making to the Northerners, but it will also guarantee them to receive a net fiscal benefit from resources development through resource revenue sharing arrangement, which have been agreed to in the agreement and will find their expression in the legislation. In addition, Aboriginal parties to the devolution agreement will receive both direct financial transfers and share in resource revenues from public lands and participate in the government decision-making in collaboration and partnership with the government of the Northwest Territories. And all these benefits have been negotiated between our government, the government of the Northwest Territories, and the Aboriginal parties, and are set out in the devolution agreement, which, as I indicated earlier, I signed in June.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Ms. Hughes for the next round of questions.
Oh, thank you very much, and I greatly appreciate the time. Minister, in your presentation, on a number of occasions, so I think you've got 3 paragraphs that deal with education, and what's interesting in your wording is it says that, je vais le dire en français, d'avoir accès à un système.
Having access to a school system that fits with the territorial and provincial standards. And I see no mention of the fact that it must be equitable, fair.
I've got tons of correspondence here from the Chiefs of Ontario, from the Chief Assembly on Education, which includes chiefs from Quebec and all over, Anishinaabe Nation opposition, to the Anishinaabe Nation, who is in opposition to the First Nations Education Act. So when you were looking at drafting the First Nation Education Act, did you consider the funding envelope? Did you consider equitable funding in designing that First Nation Education Act? And I know that you're saying that you're consulting with First Nations, but I can tell you that there's a lot of First Nations that's saying that they're not being consulted. And I know for 7 years, Chief Shining Turtle from Whitefish River First Nation has continuously asked the Minister to attend the First Nation, to meet with them so that they can have those discussions about education, about the economic impact. So I'm just trying to get some senses. Does your view and your department's view of the First Nation Education Act include equitable funding?
Well, the issue of funding is addressed squarely in the proposal that was made as much in the blueprint as in the statement at budget time when the government committed to introduce a First Nation education proposal that would contain predictable and funding.
Talking about equitable funding, same as off-reserve children. I think when we are looking at this here, I can tell you that here's your opposition, is the development of the FNEA by the federal government did not adhere to any sections of the report of the National Panel on Education, consult with Anishinaabe chiefs and councils, take into account any of the recommendation from the Council of Ministers of Education Conference focusing on First Nations education. And it goes on, and then and here's the Chiefs of Assembly on Education, and therefore be it resolved that the Chiefs in Assembly reject the development of a First Nation Education Act as announced in the federal budget 2012. Demand that the federal government uphold the honour of the Crown and fulfill its obligation to First Nations by providing needs-based sustainable education funding that supports First Nation lifelong learning. So you've indicated both here and in the House that if First Nations are not supportive of this, that you will not go forward with it. So, and you also mentioned that you needed the support, you required support for this. So what is the required support? Do you have a base on that right now? And will you ensure that the proper consultation is done? It has to be meaningful.
Yeah, it has to be meaningful, and it takes two to tango. So when you
they're willing to meet with you.
You ask a question. Will you let me answer?
Yes.
You referred to a resolution of the Assembly in Chiefs who have taken away from the AFN the mandate that they had received to work with the department, with the federal government, to develop a legislative proposal that would meet the requirements of ensuring that First Nation youth on reserve benefit from an education system that has a legislative base, a statutory basis. And notwithstanding the resolution, we have undertaken these consultations throughout the country. I have personally met with many chiefs and councils and tribal councils, so have officials, and throughout these consultations or meetings, because certain people are afraid of calling them consultation, but through these meetings we have heard First Nation calling for control of the education by First Nation. We have heard the call for predictable and sufficient funding, and ensuring that they could have and rely on a system that would respect their treaty rights. So this is with these asks in mind that we have developed a proposal on which we are continuing to consult. And that process is ongoing, and we'll see where it leads. We believe as a government that it is imperative that we act quick. The current non-system is failing students all across the country, and we believe that we have example of successful initiatives that have been taken place. I point to Nova Scotia as where the Mi'kmaq community and the province and the federal government have put in place a system that results today in Aboriginal youth on reserve in Nova Scotia graduating at a rate of 90%, above the rate of those non-Aboriginal students. So it is building upon these successes that we believe we can get the statutory base and legislative framework that will ensure that First Nation students have the right, like every other Canadian, to a good system of education.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll turn down to Mr. Hillier for the last questions for the Minister.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Merci d'être venu.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for having come before us. Our government has made immense progress since the presentation of the apologies for the residential schools in 2008. I see in our supplementary estimates B that $6 million in support of this have been allocated for commemorative exercise with regard to these residential schools because of the harm done to former students and their families and communities. Could you give us an update on
l'implémentation du travail que le gouvernement a récemment entrepris pour honorer son engagement?
To honor its commitment with regard to its obligations. Thank you for your question. As you know, our government is 100% committed to resolving in a fair and durable way this unfortunate situation with the Indian residential schools, which is at the heart of the reconciliation and renewal of our relationship with Aboriginal peoples and all Canadians. 2 weeks ago, announced that the Government of Canada will work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and all of the parties involved in order to provide the Commission with an extension of 1 year to this operational period, in other words, until June 30th, 2015, in order to complete this important work. This additional year provided to the Commission will allow it to have sufficient time to complete its mandate, including drafting its final report and reception or receiving of the documents held by Library and Archives Canada that must be supplied and will be supplied during this period of time. We, of course, want to pursue this work with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in order to help it complete its important mandate and to fulfill the obligations indicated, outlined in the convention, the agreement. So we remain committed to ensure a fair and sustainable resolution of this matter of the residential schools, and we aim to have a reconciliation agenda between the Aboriginal peoples, their communities, their families, and all Canadians. What is important, and I will conclude with this, is that it's not because the official work of the Commission will end in June 2015 that we should think that the work overall will be finished, concluded. Reconciliation is in constant need of support to move forward because the harm done by that chapter of our history continues to be felt and will continue to be felt, unfortunately, for several more generations. Thus, the importance for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians to really work together in order to confront the unfortunate consequences of that sad chapter in our national history.
Our government has a priority to empower Aboriginal citizens and protect the vulnerable. So could you talk about what the government is doing to enhance safety and security for the vulnerable, especially Aboriginal women and children who are victims of family violence?
Well, yeah, and I referred to it in my introductory remark. I mean, you know, our government recognizes that Aboriginal women are disproportionately represented as the victims of violent crime. And, you know, as I said, this is simply unacceptable. And that is why we are taking concrete action to address the issue of violence against Aboriginal women and girls. And, you know, I guess you have to look at the actions taken, you know, and I referred to the Family Homes on Reserves and Matrimonial Interests of Rights Act, which, you know, I submit with respect is an important step, you know, into getting to where we want to be. That is to provide Aboriginal women and children and families on reserve the same rights and the same protection that other Canadian kids and wives and husbands are getting. So that was, I think, an important step. And as I said, you know, it's not the amount of dollars, but we've invested over $240 million in the Family Violence Prevention Program, which has provided shelter services to thousands of children and women living on reserve. As you know, and again, in these supplementary estimate, you find us committing another 24 million in the last budget. That is another 24 million over 2 years for the Family Violence Prevention Program. But all of this in isolation, you have to have a holistic approach. That's why education, skills development, the efforts that we deploy to try to enhance the delivery of family and child services with First Nations. These are all steps which I believe can help reduce this shameful statistics about Aboriginal women and girls being victimized so much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. We know that your time is short. We've kept you longer than you committed to stay. We appreciate your willingness to stay beyond the time that we had asked you to stay. Colleagues, we will suspend just for a few minutes, and we'll continue with the questions with the other folks momentarily. Meeting suspended. Colleagues, we'll call this meeting back to order. Colleagues, we will continue the rounds of with the round of questioning. We'll turn to Mr. Sullivan now with the next questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister suggested at the very end of his statement that education was a very important part of the ministry's plans for the future. However, I'm aware that the waiting list for post-secondary education is growing. And in fact, it is now at 10,600 students who are on a waiting list to get into post-secondary education on reserve. And that has gotten bigger in the last 2 years, not smaller. And I understand that in some places the waiting list is now so large that they are no longer putting students on the waiting list. In other words, the waiting list is too large to have a waiting list. What is the department doing to try and allow Native persons, Native youth, to attend post-secondary education?
Question. Short answer is there is no waiting list. Allocation of post-secondary funds is decided by individual chiefs and councils. They decide what to do with the funds. They can fund kids, not fund kids, reallocate funds to other uses. There is no national program, there's no national intake, and there's no national waiting list. And there's nothing that prohibits First Nation children from applying for Canada student loans or for Canada study grants or for scholarships or bursaries.
But as I understand it, there is not enough money in the First Nations system to fund all of those that want to go to post-secondary education. You're suggesting they apply for other mechanisms, but that First Nations education systems do not have enough funds to provide for all that want it.
That's an assertion of some people. There's over $320 million going out to First Nations. We have very little control over what they do with it. They do not even have to spend it on post-secondary allowances for their kids.
Well, that's different from what we're understanding. On the skills training
if I could just
side of it,
ask a question. So, I mean, what we've tried to do is we've posted on the website and have distributed quite broadly a guide to scholarships and bursaries that may be available to Aboriginal kids. There is money going out for Métis bursaries, and as the minister mentioned, we put money into the Inspire, which deals directly with students and families. I think it is an area which deserves attention, but it deserves a different delivery model.
What delivery model?
One that deals directly with students and their families and doesn't go through band councils. But that's a big reform, would no doubt be very controversial and would take some time. So the government's focus right now is on K-12, as you heard the minister say.
So in terms of post-secondary education, though, what you're saying is it's your belief the bands have enough money, and if there's a waiting list, that's their problem, not the government's problem.
I'm saying that we have what we have, which is $320 million. I cannot even assure you it's all going to post-secondary in the communities.
What can you assure us?
That the Government of Canada has provided $320 million for this purpose.
And there are no, the Government of Canada doesn't have any records of where that money is spent?
You'd have to ask each band council what they do with that funds. That is the problem that was identified in the Auditor General's report of May 2011, which I commend to every member of this committee as the best diagnostic of what's wrong with services to First Nations, in which she called clearly for a legislative basis for key services and for effective local service organizations. We don't have that in education.
So switching to the skills training, which is another form of education, you've announced some money for skills training. What are the main features of that new First Nations Job Fund? Who is eligible to participate and how?
What we have on First Nations reserves is passive welfare of a 1970s model, check writing by band councils. There is no case management. There's no diversion services in which people are assessed for what they need in order to be job ready. There's no real partnership with post-secondary institutions or the private sector. There's nothing that's effective. It's a passive welfare system, and it's a trap for young adults. So the reform that the government announced in the last year is to catch up to what every province in Canada has done over the last 10 years, which is to add active case management to assess people's needs and divert them and channel them to the services, to say you're not getting a check unless you're involved in some kind of skills or upgrading or training program, to deal with whatever the issue of the individual is. It might be child care needs, it might be literacy training, it might be specific training for a specific occupation. And what we have finally been able to do is to bring all of the skills that my colleagues at, what do they call themselves now, Employment and Skills Development, used to be HRSDC, who never dealt with a non-reserve clientele, are now rolling out a program to a non-reserve clientele. So we're in the very, very, very first 6 months of that reform. I would hope to have a lot of progress for you in the next year. Projects will be rolling out that have been developed in partnership with tribal councils and First Nations. Chiefs and tribal councils are extremely excited about the opportunity to turn away young adults in particular. The focus in the first wave is 18 to 24-year-old young adults.
Thank you. We'll turn down to Mr. Seaback for the next round of questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Michael, I want to go back to talk a little bit more about specific claims. For whatever reason, it's an area I'm quite interested in. You're talking about around, I think if I remember correctly, both you and the minister were saying there's around 300 active claims right now that are going through. My question really is, are the numbers actually changing? So were there, 400 the year before, or is it sort of we're staying with around with the cases that are coming in and the cases that are going out? Are we staying at around the same number year over year?
The short answer is the numbers change virtually every day, which drove my staff crazy trying to have questions ready for today's appearance. We have 320 in progress, either at legal assessment, because I'll come back to that in a second if you don't mind, and about 180 at active negotiation. Some of them will get settled next week, I think. Some of the so the numbers do fluctuate. What we have done, certainly if any committee members are interested, is there's a dashboard on the website in which you can look up the inventory. The statistics I just read to you are from the website. You can look up by province, and you can even look up by specific file. There's information on all of the active claims on the website. Okay.
One of the things that happened was there was a 5-year mandated review. What has been the outcome of that review?
Sorry, that one of the main features of the reform of 2007 was to create a tribunal with binding powers. We never had that before. So if the government lawyers or the First Nation lawyers think they have a good case, they'll take their chances at the tribunal, or they'll decide to negotiate. The existence of the tribunal has actually sped up negotiations immensely because people have to really be serious, including government lawyers, about how good our case is. So we're seeing more settlements, actually. There are only about 40 to 45 cases filed at the tribunal, which is there as a recourse if you really think you have a good case. I don't think the tribunal's actually made any significant awards yet. It's still chewing through its initial caseload. It is essentially like a court and has the kind of characteristics of a court. And so we're coming up to the statutory review of the creation of the tribunal. It's a common device, as you know, to put into a piece of legislation. After 5 years, Parliament should review the Act. So you'll have an ample opportunity to engage in that, I think, in the early part of next year, if I remember my timing.
What would you say the average processing time of a case is that ends up at the tribunal? Do you have any numbers or statistics on that?
Part of the problem that the reform addressed was that claims had been languishing for many, many, many years. They were basically driven by the lawyers, and there wasn't a real big incentive to settle. The actual let's call them alleged breaches. A specific claim is a breach of a lawful duty by the government, so either improper handling of land or improper handling of monies. It's a fairly clear test of what you would want to find. Many of them happened in the early development of the country when railways were built, military bases expanded, canals, bridges, land was taken off reserve improperly. Other cases are about management of oil and gas monies, for example. So the actual source or fact base can go back a long way, a very long way. And some of them, in fact, there are other disputes, as you know, there are even pre-Confederation that we're trying to resolve. So they were sitting in some cases for more than 10 years. I don't have the exact statistics for you, but what I can tell you is since 2007, there's just been a massive acceleration. In many cases, what we've sped up is our judgment and determination about the legal case, and we've made a lot of offers to First Nations saying, okay, close enough, this is what we're offering as a settlement. You get different reactions. Some First Nations are happy to get that offer, and some of them are disappointed, and it does become a negotiating kind of dynamic.
Great.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Mr. Bevington. Mr. Bevington, we'll turn to you.
Well, thank you. We'll go back to the devolution agreement for a minute. There's been two First Nations governments in the Northwest Territories that have come out with strong statements against the proposed regulatory reforms. The Gwich'in and the Tlicho governments have both said no to this, to the creation of a super board. Is it the government's intention to move ahead with a legislative change which would bring about a single land and water board in the Northwest Territories?
I think, as the Minister said, notice was given on the Ways and Means, and you'll be seeing the bill, I think, within a matter of days or certainly before Christmas. That's up to the House leaders, of course, and you'll have ample opportunity to debate that bill. We are crafting it to respond to the regulatory reform initiative the government launched some time ago, and so the bill will contain implementation of the devolution agreement and implementation of some of the regulatory changes.
So you're creating an omnibus bill, and that's what you're doing?
No, it's a bill which deals with the issues that we have in the Northwest Territories. So the two are so inextricably related that it makes more sense to deal with the change in the Northwest Territories with one study by Parliament.
How would a single regulatory board be inextricably related to devolution implementation agreement? Could you? Anyhow. I don't need you to answer that. I think it's pretty evident that that's what you're going to do, and that's fine. That's, you know, I'm sure that's going to cause a lot of difficulty with people in the north, where on the one hand, some of the aspects, the devolution implementation agreement has been well received by many of the First Nations, and they have accepted it. And now we're going to layer onto that the regulatory changes that this government's proposing that are not accepted by the First Nations. How do you see that is a road to success?
Well, I think you as a committee and Parliament will have an opportunity to see all of the changes affecting the Northwest Territories at one time, and you can make a judgment as a committee how to handle the legislation.
Okay. So now going back to the contaminated sites issues. Have you projected further ahead for the total cost of these projects?
We go back from time to time for renewal of funding through both north of 60 and south of 60. So we have provisioning many years in advance. I'm happy to table with you. We also have on the internet, it's a recurrent theme, the current inventory of projects that we're working on, and we're slowly but surely completing many and working actively on others, and some are still lie in the future. But the contaminated sites program criteria are very clear. They're out on the internet. They're out there for everybody to see. We try to operate on a risk basis, dealing with the most dangerous to human health first, and we're making considerable progress on those. But it is going to take some time, and there's a lot of them south of 60 as well.
Do you have additional questions? Another minute, Mr. Bennett.
Okay. No, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay, very good. Mr. Génie-Jourdain, we'll turn to you.
Oui, quelques courtes.
Yes, a few short questions pertaining yet again to the federal contaminated sites. What progress has the department made? How many sites have been decontaminated thus far, and how many are waiting to be cleaned up? And finally, given the declared intention to remediate 5 sites by March 31st, 2014, how many years will it take to remediate all sites within federal jurisdiction?
Active lists, the projects that are underway right now, they're at different stages, and it's going to take many years to complete all of them. There's been, 200 years of development across the country using practices that wouldn't be tolerated today, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. I think just in the north, the inventory was over 1,400 sites. Now, some of these can be as small as a single oil tank under a garage somewhere, and some of them can be giant mine. There's an enormous range. Old military sites, dew line radar stations, and so on and so on. Fuel dumps, old airstrips. There is an inventory. So right now, I think the number that we're very actively working on is about 80 active sites. But one of those is Giant Mine, which is, as you know, the largest contaminated site in the country.
Thank you. No. We'll turn now to Mr. Strahl for the next part of the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask about a couple of specific items in the SUP-Bs. This is here. There's funding to support the commemoration initiative under the Indian Residential School Settlement Agreement, which honors, educates, memorializes, and/or pays tribute to former Indian residential school students, their families, and their communities. Can you maybe talk about that initiative, and maybe give us some examples of items that some projects that might have been funded under that initiative?
The program is part of the overall settlement agreement reached in 2006-2007. The main features, are the common experience payment, the adjudication of serious claims, the creation of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and so on. And part of it was the funding for commemoration projects, which are basically designed to make sure that people don't forget what happened. There is a listing on the website of all of the projects that were funded. They're largely small community-generated projects. In some cases, it's as simple as a plaque on a building to say this was where this happened. In some cases, it's actually been restoration of an old residential school that's been converted to another use. In some cases, they've been events, community gatherings, meetings of elders with young people. A lot of it is cross-generational, in fact, to make sure that the elders connect with the kids in the communities. I think we have over 100 projects all in, and happy to provide a list and some summaries of those.
And if I find that online, that's great. I did notice as well that there was a reduction under travel. Can you maybe just explain, were people doing more meetings, teleconferences? How was that savings achieved?
We've been operating with a capped operating vote for some time. That was announced in one of the previous budgets, so we've been very frugal about travel for quite some time. We've been trying to limit travel to the important sort of meeting communities, so sending out for negotiations, inspections of water facilities, activity in communities where we need to be boots on the ground, supervising construction projects and that sort of thing. Particularly internally, we've pushed really, really hard to use video conferencing tools. We've been installing them everywhere we can. Try to avoid people getting in airplanes and coming to meetings. We use video conferencing for training and so on. So I think overall, depending on what benchmark you want to use, we've made a reduction of about 25%. Now, some of the travel that you will see in our budget for travel is actually we're subsidizing the travel of former residential school students to attend the adjudication of their cases at hearings, and that counts in our travel budget. So I would caution you to dig a little deeper. The 1.1 million is an initiative that came after the budget where the government ratcheted down travel even further, and they froze 1.1 million in our department's budget to make sure it was not available for travel, and that's reflected in these subs. So it essentially creates a situation where we're asking less funds from Parliament because we know we're not going to spend that 1.1 million.
Okay. Do I have time, Mr. Chair? Yeah. Okay. Also, I wanted to ask about the site work for the Canadian High Arctic Research Station. Could you give us an update on that project and maybe just some indication of where that's at? Obviously, a priority for our government, but it is a specific line item here, so perhaps you can just give us an update on that.
Yeah, the project, as I'm sure members are familiar with, was announced some time ago. We've gone through the issues of its mandate, science priorities, the location, which community it should be in, and even what site within the community it should be in, all in very close consultation with the community. The short answer is we're on time and on budget. The slightly longer answer is we're now in the pre-construction phase, mobilizing materials, getting the site ready, doing the fine-tuning of the design work, and there actually will be shovels in the ground next summer, all aiming for an opening in 2017. In parallel with that, we're working on the actual science program that the station will be the hub of. We're hiring a chief scientist, and we're working with other departments on the science priorities in the north.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Ms. Jones for the next round of questions.
Thank you. Actually, can you tell us where the research station is going to be based? I'm not really sure. Maybe others do, but
Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, which is more or less halfway across the Northwest Passage, and it was chosen because a short airplane ride in a circle from that station reaches the largest number of ecosystems and geological areas. It's the ideal one for field work.
Okay, good. Earlier in your response, you talked about money for skill training in First Nation communities, and I guess I wanted to outline that in my riding, they've already been making a transition to more active case management and employment counseling for Aboriginal people who seek funding for training, and it's working very well. Like everything, you know, there's always going to be some hiccups, but one of the concerns that continuously gets expressed to me is still the lack of funding. They do tend to run a wait list, especially on skilled training that extends beyond the 12-month period if they're going into 2-year or 3-year training programs. And so in that light, I guess my question would be, has there been any assessment done on particular areas that have made the transition and are experiencing right now probably some shortages in meeting what the training need might be?
No, it's a very good question. I think this is an example, like other areas, education, post-secondary housing, and others, where there are pockets of real excellence out there in First Nation communities, strong leaders are doing all kinds of things and delivering great services. I think our challenge is to make that possible and available to the largest number of communities possible. So one of the key features of getting the income assistance reform designed and approved was to point to examples that show the way for other communities. The minister alluded to the role that Mi'kmaq communities have played in education as a possible signpost of what other communities could follow. So I don't know the specifics of what you're referring to, but I can say if members of Parliament have any feedback whatsoever on specific communities and specific cases, we'd like to hear it so that we can fine-tune the program as it goes ahead. The underlying premise is to try to provide the same kinds of services in helping people get off income assistance that would be available to somebody down the road off reserve.
Yeah. I guess my question really stems from the fact that we have a lot of industry going on, and most of those industry agreements are with Aboriginal First Nations, and there is requirements for employment and training and so on. So because of that, I guess you get more buy-in, you get a lot more marketing of what the programs are, so, you know, the list gets a little longer for those who want to do it. But I'd be happy to talk to you about that. The other thing is, if you could provide us a list of those groups right now that have transitioned to that model, you know, so that we could also consult with some of them and find out how it's working. And if there's any timetable in place to bring that to the other Aboriginal self-governments and Aboriginal groups, then you could probably provide that to us as well. My other question is with regard to, I guess, the comments that was made by the AFN National Chief, Sean Atleo, and he issued an open letter basically telling the government that the current federal proposal for the bill for First Nations education was not acceptable. But he also outlined the absolute need for funding guarantee for First Nation children to learn in a safe and secure environment, of which we've talked a lot about this morning in this committee. And I guess my question would be what the plan is right now to engage with Chief Atlow and with others to resolve the concerns that they have and to work with them with regard to this bill.
Well, I think the Minister spoke to it a fair bit. We're trying to be of assistance to him in this. It's essentially a political process. There are 44 Aboriginal political organizations. They have different views on this initiative. There are 79 tribal councils and there are 630 chiefs. The decision on how much consensus is enough is a political one that the Minister will have to make and you'll have to make as members of Parliament. There are only 308 people in the country who can actually create First Nations Education Act. They're the members of Parliament. So you'll have to make that judgment at some point on the legislation. The Minister's constant refrain, and I entirely agree with it and support it, is that funding should accompany the implementation of that legislation. It should not replace it or substitute for it. Very clear message from the Auditor General and the National Panel is we need the accountabilities and the rigor that legislation would bring. And we will certainly be helping the Minister make a case for funding for implementation of the legislation.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Mr. Strahl for the next questions.
Thank you very much. Another item in the sub-Bs I'd like some clarification on is funding for out-of-court settlements. Can you perhaps indicate why that $61 million wasn't in the mains, or why is it there? And maybe just explain: does this happen routinely? Is this as a result of a specific case, or why is that amount there?
Why does it show up in SUPs is perhaps the easier question. We are constantly being sued. There's a lot of litigation against the Crown. It's cheap and easy to file a statement and claim in court. It costs virtually nothing to file a statement of claim against the Crown. Sometimes people are serious. Sometimes they're just trying to trigger a negotiation of some sort. So it's very hard to provision against that. When we do get advice from our lawyers to settle, and a settlement is possible, then we go and get the resources from Treasury Board for the settlement. And it's almost always briefed in through supplementary estimates. Some of them can be quite large. Our settlement with the James Bay Cree was over $1 billion. And in other cases, they might be very small amounts. I think I gave in a previous answer the 4 cases that are covered by this $60 million.
Excellent. So there's also some funding that is being reprofiled for the registration of applicants for Indian status as a result of Gender Equity and Indian Registration Act. Can you explain why it was delayed from 2012, 2013 to 2013, 2014? And do you see, is there going to be a need for additional reprofiling, or should this take care of that?
Some members of this committee will remember when the bill went through, we had to provide our best forecast of how many people would apply and at what pace they would come in. We were expecting, based on our sort of demographic analysis, the best we could do, about 45,000 applicants. We think that's probably still about right. But we've only received 39,000 to date. So it's simply, we are processing them very rapidly. Almost all of those cases have been processed, and status has been given to you know, about 35,000 people. So we simply didn't need the money in the previous year. We've slid it in this year, and we'll just continue as people apply under the Act. At some point, probably everybody who's eligible that fits the criteria of that legislation will have applied. People that were well aware of the situation probably were in the first batch, but there will probably be you know, small numbers in future years.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Turn now to Ms. Hughes. Ms. Hughes, we are
Actually, I was just going to ask
yes.
you to, I'm not going to ask any particular questions, but I would like to ask you if you could ask the department to respond to any of the questions that were prepared by the analysts that were not answered and submit that to us. Thank you very much.
I can't do that. That hasn't been a regular practice of the committee. I mean, the practice of the committee is, if in fact you'd like to ask the questions that the analysts prepare, that you ask them when your turn comes around. And so we've had time. We are now running out of time. I think it would be incumbent upon members
That's
to
fine, and we can look at the ones that we really want answered, and we'll submit them to them. Thank you very much.
I was going to just say that we are finished the third round of questions now. The best thing to do, I think, is to now go to the votes, if committee members are prepared to do that. We will do that, and then we have some committee business to take care of. And so I will, turning to the votes, I'll ask the questions. Shall vote 1B under Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Shall vote 5B under Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Shall vote 10B under Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Shall vote 30B under Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. And shall vote 35 under Indian Affairs and Northern Development carry? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. And shall I report the supplementary estimates to the House? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That carries. Colleagues, I will report this back to the House. I do want to thank Mr. Warnock and Ms. McGowan for being here. We appreciate your willingness to stay for the remainder of the meeting, and we are thankful for the questions. There were some questions that were specifically asked for additional responses, and so if you will hasten to respond to those and get them into the clerk, we will distribute them to committee members. Colleagues, we will now just suspend the meeting, go into camera. I just have one piece of future business to take care of, and then we will dismiss. Meeting suspended.